Shift Happens Podcast.
Welcome to the Shift Happens Podcast, where we explore the latest trends and technologies transforming the future of work. In today's episode, we're joined by Andres Ortola, Country General Manager and President at Microsoft Portugal. We'll discuss Portugal's economic outlook, the adoption of AI technologies, and how digital transformation is shaping the future of work in society. Let's dive in. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Shift Happens. We're so excited today to be with Andres Ortola. He leads Microsoft Portugal. Andres, welcome to Shift Happens.
Thanks, Dax. It's great to be here. Thanks for inviting.
Yeah, boy, we were just talking about how time flies. Can't believe it's 6 months since we saw each other.
Indeed. It was good to see you guys here, so you could enjoy the energy here at Portugal.
Yeah, definitely. And that's one of the places Mari and I were discussing. We'll definitely go back and, hopefully further grow our business. Now, before we get started, we always start this podcast with a segment and we ask our guests what songs resonate when you think about disruption, change, and transformation, especially what we're going through now in tech. So which song did you pick, Andres?
That was my favorite question of all. Been thinking about initially had a one thought, which is I Can Get No Satisfaction, Rolling Stones. Like never ending schedule, which is great. It's supposed to be that way. The bar just keeps on going higher and higher. But I guess the second thought was Imagine from John Lennon. What you think about digital transformation, and transformation itself is all about imagining a better world, a better place, a more sustainable society as a whole, and technology being the one driver can help us achieve that. So I think I like that second thought better. So I imagine would be the song.
I love that choice of song, because when that song came out, I think they recorded in the early 70s, it was a double meaning, right? Certainly on the surface, better world, peace, unity, but at the same time there was a subtone to what's going on in the world at that time, which in some ways we can kind of see the parallel what's going on. So do you think that day will come though, because of technology, because of all these change and innovation we're doing, where we can contribute, especially us in tech, to this utopia that we envision?
It's interesting. I usually do some of my presentations sharing two magazines, two magazines, both of January 1975. The first portrays President Ford in the United States battling a big three-headed dragon, and each head has three lines. One is recession, inflation, and energy. And if you think about it, we are here many, many years later, we're kind of battling with the same thing. Now, the same month, the other magazine is a magazine that portrays the Altair 8800. And that magazine is interesting because the story is that magazine was a magazine that was picked up by a very, very young Paul Allen and took it to another very, very young colleague of his, which was Bill Gates. And the vision was like, here's a person on computing, and in the face of such adversity, innovation and technology was a way for humankind, for societies to actually evolve. And I think, not sure if we can reach to that place, to that nirvana. Unfortunately, there's a lot of geopolitical factors that will always be in play. But I'm optimistic in thinking that technology can be that factor now that can help us propel once again society forward.
That's actually really interesting. I love that point of view. It does put things into context, right? How in many ways there's like this cycle, like this repetitive cycle, and now we're at the place where, back to a great song you chose, we have to imagine what happens at a faster pace now. Speaking of, maybe where we can start, Andres, is what was interesting. Dux and I were speaking earlier this morning that Portugal's economy, the forecast for 2024 was extremely positive. especially since the rating was upgraded to an A by 3 agencies, namely Moody's, I think Fitch and DBRS was the other two. And the forecast really is around an economic, fundamental that really is powered by lower interest rates and a large number of international investors now taking, keen interest on what happens next in the Portugal economy. And so I guess I'm wondering, with Moody's forecasting and the average economic growth rate at 2%, I believe it is, over the next 5 years, how does this begin to influence the work you and your teams are doing from a Microsoft perspective?
Well, you're right. I mean, the economy does have an optimistic outlook. If you think about it in the context of Europe, think about, we just left there. For context, we left the pandemic not so long ago, which sort of impacted every economy. And then the second we entered into was still our fortunately in a war, experiencing war and the war effects of Russia and Ukraine over here in Europe. And initially we also sort of survived that immediate effect of the energy shortages and high prices. One of the things that is great about Portugal, and one of the things that I think they've done fairly well, is there isn't much of energy dependency from these countries. There is, of course, some, but to the lesser point. In fact, one of the things that Portugal is actually doing fantastically well is working in the energy transformation, the change here into a renewable energy. It's going at a fast pace. Last year, around November, Portugal broke the world record, by staying 6 days in a row working only with sustainable energy. So I think the year before it was something around half an hour or so. 6 days now. God knows what's going to be this year, but it's a great and intentional bet on renewable energy, and they're cutting out dependencies of other geopolitical factors. That's one. The second has been the shift that the Portuguese economy wants and is trying to, and is pushing towards digital, right? So Portuguese economy is right now 80% or so services, in which many of them are actually digital in some sort of way. Portugal has or had, changes all the time, but it has the highest unicorn count by habitants. We had last year, but the valuations changed, but we had about 7 unicorns, and a country that's 10 million people, inhabitants, which is quite high. So the bet on technology, the bet of the energy independence, the bet on technology, and last but not least, there's been a huge inflow of digital nomads. Conditions of living here in Portugal are actually rather good for people to come, spend a year or more, add value to the economy, and start transforming the traditional shapes and ways of doing business here. I think the combination of three is a super interesting landscape. We had a government change, so we just had a new government coming up. So we'll get to see what the government brings up. We just had European elections here, also shaping up a little bit of our agenda. But I think it's an interesting period.
No, it's very interesting to hear that point of view. And I would imagine also that the attraction, because of the lower interest rates from outside investors, also probably creates more opportunity for startups, for organizations that really can be part of the motions that you mentioned. And I can only imagine that grid management, as you talk about energy and sustainability, is probably a great opportunity to enhance operations with new capabilities. So that kind of transitions me to, how do we think about, or how are you all thinking about the generative AI capability coming into these motions? Is it a top of mind? And is it where, organizations are starting to think, well, maybe with GenAI we can achieve efficiencies? And if so, I'm curious as to which industries are the most prominent ones for this economic recovery.
Yeah, well, definitely GenAI has been a game changer everywhere. Portugal is not a stranger to that, and we have seen a massive shift. I would say the last year has been incredible in terms of what we've seen. In fact, today we see about 65% of organizations in Portugal are already using AI in some form or shape. and the rest is actually getting in the next 12 or 24 months will be on board. So we're thinking about the vast majority of companies are going to have some sort of business shift towards AI. 77% of organizations say that it's extremely important for them to have a responsible implementation of AI, which is an interesting factor, which, the price of an unregulated and uncontrolled progress can be too damaging for an economy like this one. And so 77% agree that this is super important. Only 36% of them to actually govern this transformation. So we're in this moment where there seems to be a huge agreement on, hey, this is the way to go. We're all clear that we need to move into the GenAI direction. But it's more to do when it comes to acknowledging that the sense of developing AI as platforms, as responsible platforms, and so on. We've seen many fronts, like, started from public sector, because you think about public sector would be the most reluctant to, but honestly, I've seen great things coming up in public sector, probably pushed by this need of optimizing, this need of really changing the way they do things, to scale differently. We've seen great examples of public sector using GenAI to get better service to the citizens, get more intelligence of what to do, control processes, and so on and so forth. The second group would be large companies, which are actually leading the way when it comes to scale and how they implement from many perspectives, either is enhancing customer relationships or looking at the productivity of their employees, or reshaping business processes, or even pushing the innovation curve, accelerating the innovation curve. In that sense, I think that these large corporations are actually leading the country away. And then the other two remaining ones are smaller companies. You would say the digital startups are definitely on the edge of that transformation. The challenge that I think Portugal has is that last group of SMEs, which are in numbers probably 98% of the companies count. And how do we make that transformation of that SMEs? The leader of an SME company is not a digital leader today. We are investing in trying to get that change, that mindset change.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I had the good fortune of spending time at a Gartner conference this earlier. And I think, Dux, you were also just at one in London, and they spoke extensively about digital workplace leaders and the importance of these leaders to really take a step first to understand that there's a culture change required in order for GenAI adoption to truly take off. But I'm curious as to, when you think about these digital workplace leaders in Portugal specifically, do you think that there's a cultural change required for many of these organizations to transform their workforce, or do you feel that the culture in Portugal is such that there's already a eagerness to adapt GenAI, and that there's a blend between personal sort of computing and work computing? I'm just curious as to how you're seeing that shift happening.
It's interesting. So I would say there is a huge conscious about the power of GenAI, what it can bring to the business. There is a huge acknowledgement according to the World Trade Index. More than 2/3 of leaders say they wouldn't hire someone without AI skills. Now, less than 40% of users have actually received some skills from the companies, which is the contradiction. And there's this new term that is very much a common discussion here in Portugal when I talk to business leaders. Is this concept of, we have bring your own device, bring your own identity. It's a reality here. When you employ someone, nowadays there is a common expectation that you should bring your own AI knowledge, training, understanding. Interestingly, you would think, or you would say, the younger generations are probably more ready. That is true. Gen Z employees and new employees come in are 85% ready, or 85% of them are ready with some AI knowledge. But boomers, if you go to the other extreme, which are still in the workplace, they're not that far. The 73 or so percent are ready to bring their own AI into the company. So in that sense, employees have actually quickly got into this gist of generative AI, whether it's for common tools, ChatGPT, and things that consumerize really fast. But I think the change, it's going to come from the workforce being super ready, or being more ready and understanding AI as a basic skill, more so than the leaders taking the decision to train them. I think leaders will have to change, will have to make the change, forced by the forces of market.
Well, Andres, I want to pick up from that. Speaking of leaders, right? At least in our observation around the world, speaking with customers, the difference with this transformation, unlike when we went to the cloud or during COVID, people adopted Teams, the drive is coming from the leaders. While certainly IT's pushing it, but we see a stark difference where leaders want AI in their organization. Now, IT will still have to be responsible for deploying it responsibly and securely. Are you seeing that as well in your region, in Portugal, the greater EMEA, where the push, the excitement is really coming from business decision makers to implement AI?
Well, I'll put it this way. So when we see AI catching really, really fast, it's only when the leadership understand this is not just an IT thing. This is a new way of doing business, and it's a new way of doing things, right? I was just sharing about some of the cases. If you think about enriching employee experiences, right? Which is something you would say, well, this is traditionally IT sort of tooling. We can make not only this more inclusive, but also more productive. We have it here. It's called the Instituto de Empleo and Formación, which is a training for new employees to come into the workforce. We help them. Their leadership understood that they needed a tool for to be able to attract these new employees coming into Portugal that might not be Portuguese fluent, but they need to get out. So AI is helping them reach out and really capture this new population of workers coming in. That is not an IT decision. It's direct political and business decision, if you will. Similarly, if you think about one of our largest energy customers here, they developed a global energy market trading system, which is all AI based. And now they are doing by the second trading of energy with 16 countries, 16 European markets in real time. Obviously, that was not, again, a IT-driven decision, business-driven decision. So when we see these two things coming together, I think technology is, for the first time, readier. When we see the real intent, the leadership coming in and buying in, I think we see those cases coming and really driving impact. I think to your question, I think leaders need to realize that this is not just one more tool. This is the way business is going to look like in the next 10 years.
It's exciting indeed, especially with the recent Microsoft build where Microsoft announced these agents for AI. Because now it's beyond asking, look, Copilot is great, for example, where it summarizes meetings. You can ask, what's my most important email? But when these agents start coming through with very focused use case, like you described, where there's this one agent I saw, or AI agent, that checks on new employees where, hey, how's your first week here at Microsoft? I saw you were filling out this form and you didn't complete it. How can I help you? I think that type of proactivity and business focused use case would really change the game for a lot of businesses.
Absolutely. The ability for us to scale in many ways and to reach out this real value. Think about my two favorite sort of examples in the sense. Think about education, health, education, health, and justice, right? These are the models that we use today are probably 200 years old.
Pretty much.
In the way we do education, in the way we do justice, in the way we do medicine, right? So think about the concept of the family doctor, which used to be great, used to where someone knows you well, but obviously there are enough doctors. There's no health system in the world, no matter emerging or mature market, that has enough doctors because the model just doesn't scale anymore. Imagine the doctors could have that sort of agent, or yourself have a health agent that could be tailored to you, that could be absolutely targeted to what you need, when you need it, and so on and so forth. The scalability there is huge. Same happens in education, right? So how can we expect the teacher to scale to beyond 20 or 30 children and know them and give them a tailored education? It's impossible. So technology will bring that factor, that agent of education, whatever we used to call them, but that scalability is going to come there. And justice, obviously, another no-brainer to me. How do we make faster decisions? How do we help these people? The whole chain of that, right, from the lawyers to the citizens, to the lawyers, to the studies, to the government, so on, so to the judges, etc. I think definitely we see a proliferation of agents that will, call it co-pilots or agents, that will drive this personalized improvement in productivity.
You mentioned a lot of these industries that, in my mind, they're ready to go, right? Because I can think of, you're right, education. Imagine how teachers could be supported with a lot of these co-pilots, with a lot of not just learning, not just testing, not just assessment, but more proactive. Because just like doctors, we don't have enough teachers in any part of the world. And boy, having these capabilities would definitely not only help them, but also help a lot of the learning that's happening. I mean, we see this already in countries like Singapore, where used to be, they're quite advanced and focus on AI for education. So I think with the different adoption rates, so to speak, and digital leadership from different countries, the good news is we're seeing a lot more collaboration and sharing and how upskilling is done across the board. I'm sure that's going on in Europe as well.
It is. And if you think about, as you look at, okay, so how do we keep scaling? Recently, I came across this the World Economic Forum, skills to be needed in the future, the next years. Now, out of the top 5, only one is technology. Technology literacy, of course, is going to be there. But interestingly, creative thinking is number 1. Analytical thinking is number 2. Curiosity and learning, a lifelong learning, number 4 in this case. And then resiliency, flexibility, and agility. When you think about those 4 skills, and if we keep on investing on this creative thinking and analytical thinking, discerning what's right and what's wrong, and leave the repetitive tasks, the mundane tasks to these robots or agents or co-pilots or whichever name they take in the future. This is where I think your first question is, how do we see the future? How do we imagine the future? This is where it starts to imagine something different at all levels.
This is a very important point. These core pillars sometimes gets lost in the mix because on one hand, while we're all excited about this technology, there's also on the other end of the spectrum where people are like, oh, the world's ending, Skynet's coming, AI is going to take my job, which clearly is not. And I feel like the focus sometimes it's too limited on this idea that we're done, we don't have jobs. But to your point, those 4 key pillars requires a lot of human ability. And that's why I love how Microsoft turned all these AI as co-pilot, because we forget, right? they're doing the first pass, and we as humans would have the final say.
Always be in control. But I started with saying, we needed that sort of change the two, and in the face of geopolitical crisis, technology can help propel the society forward. Imagine what happened in 1760 when the first industrial revolution happened. If you think about raiders and drivers, horses disappeared when the car came up, but definitely the industries that the car, the automobile technology enabled, not just the automobiles factories and ecosystem, but even the business they enable, the transportation, the communication. We are in some of that to a certain extent in a second industrial revolution. It's hard to see it in the moment. It's hard to think about what where am I going to fit in this schema? But when you think about the 2 or 3 examples we talked about, if we don't have a technological solution to justice, education, health, how do we think this is going to work? Having more doctors, the system collapse eventually. So I think it's a great opportunity for us leaders to take this and to try to bend that curve of innovation, to lean in and try to implement this technology and let it take control of what needs to be taken control. While, to your point, we keep the humans in control.
So Andres, you had a fascinating career. And so for our listeners, you may not know this, Andres pretty much lived around the world throughout his career through all these technological shifts, right? So think, on-prem to the cloud. And during COVID, during pandemic, I believe you serve as a leader in Microsoft Philippines, where everybody jumped on Teams. And in the middle of the pandemic, you moved to Portugal, right? So all these shifts and changes, do you see a pattern of how the shifts are happening, and more importantly, how organizations are adopting this, layering in all the societal changes as well? Is it very similar, or is it different right now?
Well, I could talk about it in the sense of the times I moved, something happened out there, but not really. And look, definitely, technology and innovation go always hand in hand. Not only innovation comes from technology, but they go hand in hand, and there's been waves. The one question that I ask myself, and I tell some of my leaders, if you think about the last, let's give it 20 years back, we have seen the internet wave as big waves, right? I'm not going to talk about the ones in between, but the big to me, the big waves of innovation, internet. The second would be probably mobile in terms of business they enabled, right? AI is probably a third of that scale, right? As a leader, I ask my fellow leaders and I ask myself, where was I? How did I serve the first wave of internet? How did I serve the wave of mobile? How am I surfing this way? Because if I happen to miss the first two and I caught up after, I think this one will happen a lot faster, and you better be at the top of this wave. Now, but the pandemic, you alluded to the pandemic. Pandemic was, a fantastic period for humankind as we realized the technology that was available but not deployed. We ended up having a case for deploying that technology, teams, growth, etc., online working. Nobody thought about it, but I would hope that for this wave of innovation, we didn't need a present factor such as pandemic. Now, think it through what you see today and what's motivating innovation. Think about the geopolitical tension that we have, at least in Europe. Is remote work a reality? I think it is. It's augmented agents that deliver service digitally a reality. I think it is. And so in that sense, I foresee changes are, probably going to be driven from now on this new wave of innovation. The question that I ask myself is how ready I am. How am I equipped as a leader, and how am I equipping my teams, my customers, into taking this way forward?
Shift Happens Podcast. Shift Happens Podcast.
Well, Andres, it's been an awesome conversation. We can keep going. But before we wrap up, my friend, what 1 or 2 tips do you have for organizations, not just in Portugal, but pretty much around the world, on how they can get started to maximize AI and really get ahead of this wave, right? And like you said, not wait till, knock on wood, a situation like pandemic happens before people jump on.
Well, that's probably the question of the day. Look, I think the first, I think you alluded to that, is leaders need to believe and understand, leaning into this way of innovation. You can't let it pass. You cannot ignore it, or it will be too late for you, the leader, the company, for your teams. And so leaning and understand it. The second thing is it's a fundamental, a cultural, if you will, philosophical approach to AI, which is here to increase our capabilities, not to replace people. And if you approach this innovation wave with this mindset, you will find yourself finding those cases, making sure this technology helps your people, your customers, your processes, and so on and so forth. I think that is probably the challenge we have as leaders, and I truly hope that we can help from Microsoft and in Portugal to get our customers and our future, the people that is actually entering into the workspace, to understand this technology is here to stay and to change, hopefully, the world for good.
That's right. And as John Lennon would say, maybe we're dreamers, but we'll see. The world will become as one, right?
We're not the only ones. That's for
right.
sure.
Thank you, Andres. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And until the next episode, have a good one.
Thanks, Dax. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Shift Happens Podcast.
Thanks for listening. We just learned how Portugal is actively addressing the digital divide and how crucial it is to lean into AI innovation. Those who can adapt, learn, and lead with AI will thrive in the future. So, invest in both technology and human skills for a better future in responsible innovation. If you like today's episode, subscribe and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcast. Until the next time.
Shift Happens Podcast. Shift Happens Podcast.